I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of Marin Local Agency Formation Commission. It's Thursday, October 12th, and it's 6:30 p.m. So with that, would one of you like to read the public access and public instructions?
I don't think we need to.
Okay. Okay, so, and do we have anybody on Zoom from the commission?
They can't be.
Oh, we're going to start that in as a possibility.
There are special rules that you have to follow if they were on Zoom. Follow them. So
They could, though.
only non-board members are allowed to be on Zoom. Yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah, it's under just cause under AB 2449.
yes, but also if you provide your address.
Correct. We didn't have anyone who did that.
beforehand. Okay,
Correct.
so we'll belabor that in December. Okay, so roll call, please, Claire.
Vice Chair Rodoni,
Here.
Commissioner Bordeaux, Chair Kohler,
Here.
Commissioner Caius, Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Murray,
Here.
Commissioner Lucan, and alternate Commissioner Smith.
Even if you know they're not here.
May I ask, do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're calling them.
Commissioner Burke, Commissioner Moulton Peters, Commissioner Hilliard.
We do have quorum.
Okay, thank you. And would there any members of the commission like to remove or rearrange items on the agenda? Hearing none. Okay, let's start public open time. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on the current agenda. All statements that require response will be referred to staff for reply in writing or will be placed on the commission's agenda for consideration at a later meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Over there. So anybody on Zoom wanting to speak on open time? I see no members of the public here. Okay, we'll close public open time. Consent calendar items, we're moving on to consent. All items calendared as consent are considered ministerial or non-substantive and subject to a single motion approval. The chair or designee will also consider requests from the commission to pull an item for discussion. Commissioner Murray, could you use your mic?
Sorry, yeah, on item 1, a quick comment, just on the minutes. That's on top of page 4, item 7 on hybrid meetings. It's showing me as a vote for abstain and also yes, and it was abstain vote. So just delete the yes, please. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would any members of the commission like to pull any items? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone on Zoom with their hands raised? Okay, bringing it back to the commission for a motion or.
I'll move the consent calendar, noting that I was not present at the regular meeting, but I read the minutes and understand them.
I'll second that.
Okay, you have to speak into the mic because it's being
A
recorded.
little closer. Is that better?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do we need to take a break for anything? Oh, okay. It's used to be on the door. It's not there. Okay. All right. Let's move on to item 4, presentation of the Southern Marin Wastewater Municipal Service Review Public Draft. This is a hearing for the commission to review and make recommendations. The hearing will be continued to the next meeting. So any members of the commission have questions that they'd like to ask at this time?
Actually, normally we do a presentation first from staff and then we
I
go to
apologize.
questions after that.
Yeah.
So Jason Fried, your executive officer, in just a second, Jaren's going to get up and give you or sit in his seat and give you a presentation of the full MSR, which he's the main author of for this. Before we get into this one, for some of our newer commissioners, interestingness behind it. I will leave the comment that as far as it goes. There is a long history between the SASM members and LAFCo. For those that don't know, in 2011, we attempted to do a forced consolidation. That was before any of us other than Commissioner Rodoni was serving on the commission, although at that time he was a special district member, not a county supervisor. And we have since, gone through a different process of how we want to act and towards these things. So this one we went into with a slightly different approach than most of the MSRs we do. One of the things that we did do for this one is normally we sit down and meet with all the head staff person for each agency, which we did. This time I added to that list, sitting down and talking with each of the chairs of the 4 SASM independent members. And one of those people also happens to be the chair of SASM itself. So I got 2 for 1 with Commissioner Kayas there, serving in 2 roles. I do want to thank Commissioner Kayas. He was actually very helpful for me in getting the meeting with the other 3 chairs of SASM, of the SASM agencies. And so we had a good sit down chat with all of them. He joined me for those meetings. And I want to thank those board presidents for doing that. We had a good, frank discussion, which is what helped me and Jaron when we were coming up with what our recommendations are, what do we expect to occur. We had a good, frank discussion with them, presented some of the information we had, talked with them about it, found out like what is behind some of this stuff, a little bit more detail than we normally would do. So with that, I will hand this over to Jaron to go through his normal presentation on the MSR.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Okay. All right. So the Southern Marin wastewater MSR's public draft was released to the public on Wednesday, September 18th. This evening, I have a short presentation on the study to share with the commission. Since we have a new commissioner with us for whom this will be his first municipal service review, I've added a bit of extra background information to the usual MSR presentation to offer a bit more context. So to start things off, the Southern Marin wastewater MSR encompassed a total of 5 agencies in Southern Marin County: the Sewerage Agency of Southern Marin, Alto Sanitary District, the El Monte Sanitary District, Homestead Valley Sanitary District, and Richardson Bay Sanitary District. Here is a quick look at the map of all the agencies' boundaries that were included in the study. If you care to look at the screen behind you, it is up there for you guys as well. So as I said a second ago, I want to offer a bit more context on MSR work as a whole. So I'll lead off with what is a municipal service review. An MSR is a study that is designed to equip LAFCo with the relevant information and data necessary for the commission to make informed decisions on spheres of influence. The requirement for LAFCOs to conduct MSRs was an acknowledgement of the importance of spheres of influence and the recognition that regular periodic updates should be conducted on a 5-year basis with the benefit of better information and data through MSRs. With that said, every MSR maintains the same minimum requirements that must be reconciled within each study. MSRs must ultimately provide 7 specific written determinations that can be seen in the study's determinations section. So if MSRs were designed to help LAFCO make decisions on spheres of influence, what exactly is a sphere of influence? A sphere of influence is defined in CKH as a plan for the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency as determined by the commission. SOIs are intended to both proactively guide and respond to the need for the extension of infrastructure and delivery of municipal services to areas of emerging growth and development. Simultaneously, SOIs are also intended to discourage urban sprawl and the premature conversion of agricultural and open space resources to urbanized areas. Just like with the MSR, SOIs also have a specific number of determinations that must be reconciled when establishing, amending, or updating a sphere of influence for any local agency. Those determinations are the present and planned land uses in the area, including agricultural and open space lands, the present and probable need for public facilities and services in the area, the present capacity of public facilities and adequacy of public services that the agency provides or is authorized to provide, the existence of any social or economic communities of interest in the area if the commission determines that they are relevant to the agency, i.e. a disadvantaged unincorporated community or DUC, And lastly, for an update of an SOI of a city or special district that provides public facilities or services related to sewers, municipal or industrial water, or structural fire protection, the present and probable need for those public facilities and services of any disadvantaged unincorporated communities within the existing sphere of influence. So now that we've established all of these whats, we move on to the whys, and we'll start with more of a 30,000 foot view of what is LAFCo's overarching why. LAFCo's legislative charge is stated specifically as discouraging urban sprawl, preserving open space and prime ag lands, efficiently providing government services, and encouraging the orderly formation and development of local agencies based upon local conditions and circumstances. Additionally, CKH states that one of the objectives of the commission is to conduct studies and to obtain and furnish information that will contribute to the logical and reasonable development of local agencies in each county to shape the development of local agencies so as to advantageously provide for the present and future needs of each county and its communities. So why do we need to update spheres of influence? CKH requires SOIs to be updated every 5 years or as necessary in order to address the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency. And finally, why do we do municipal service reviews? The MSR is intended to provide information and analysis to support a sphere of influence update. The purpose of an MSR in general is to provide a comprehensive inventory and analysis of the services provided by local municipalities, service areas, and special districts, and discuss possible areas for improvement and coordination. In addition to the required determinations, MSRs are useful tools in reviewing current practices and exploring future opportunities for collaboration among local agencies to achieve common goals and efficient service delivery. So as the commission reviews and considers this MSR, some of the ways the information within it should be utilized include the guiding of subsequent sphere of influence updates, informing future boundary changes, and initiating government reorganizations. Within this study, there was obviously a lot of information provided on many different aspects of the agency's encompass. And ultimately, all that information is compiled to be able to complete each of the 7 determinations. Some of those determinations include recommendations from LAFCo that will require additional efforts moving forward, either on behalf of the agency or LAFCo staff, or a collaborative effort between both parties. Within this study, determinations that will require additional efforts moving forward include the following. The recommendation was made for both Almani and Homestead Valley to pursue outside service agreements for parcels being served within Tamalpais CSD. Both of these have also been requested for documentation that may exempt them from this due to the connection being made pre-2000. So we are waiting on documentation from either agency for that. Otherwise, we will be looking for an OSA for those parcels being served for that. The exploration of the addition of more specific language within the SASM agreement to address protocols for any future necessitation of the purchase of treatment plant allocation between member agencies. The recommendation for the governing boards of Almani and Alto to contract from 5 members to 3 due to the high number of occurrences of county board of supervisors appointments to the boards, as well as consistent lack of interested candidates when seats become vacant. And finally, direction from the commission on current stance of Marin LAFCo surrounding LAFCo policy 5.1B3, as well as towards the consolidation of the 4 districts encompassed in this study. And outside of this study item that will be coming to you at the next meeting as well, during the course of working through some of the map making in our new GIS system, I noticed that currently the SOI for Novato Fire District is larger than its boundary, which is not supposed to be a thing. So we will be bringing you a recommended sphere update for Novato Fire when we bring the other sphere recommendations to you at the next meeting. Let's see. The public comment period for this study is currently ongoing and will run through the end of the day on Friday, November 17th. As of this morning, we haven't received any comments from either the agencies involved or any members of the public. We have received comments from a couple of commissioners. I'll now turn it back to the commission for any questions or discussions that you might like to have on this item.
So do any commissioners have questions?
I have comments.
I think we'll do questions first and then we'll open it up to the public hearing and then we'll do comments. That's all right. Okay, Craig, I'm sorry, Commissioner Murray.
Thank you, Barbara. Or thank you, Chair Kohler.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jaren. Good summary. And I particularly appreciate staff's work to work on some of the planned governmental recommendations on changes within SASM, Almonte and Alto moving from 5 to 3, board members having difficulty from the original county appointments. I did send an email earlier indicating, has Alto ever considered, since it's immediately adjacent to Richardson Bay, to become part of Richardson Bay and just part of that whole organization and management? That's one question. I have a few others. Do you want me? Okay, but let's go one by
No,
one, guys.
yeah, if you want me to address that right now, I can't tell you if there have been any specific discussions between just those two agencies on coming together by themselves.
Right.
I will say that in our discussions with the board president that I had, that Commissioner Kayas was also a part of, and if I get this wrong, Commissioner Kayas, feel free to correct me, that Alto had no interest in being a part of anything else other than their own agency by themselves.
Including not being part of SASM or
Well, they want to be like they have to be part of SASM for their treatment purposes, but they want to be their own independent agency, and they have zero interest in being merged with anyone else in any way, shape, or form. If I get that wrong, please.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
okay. So one other is more kind of higher level, and this might be helpful for our new commissioner too as well. There's a definition in terms of prime ag land, and that our obligation to protect that here in Marin County. And you talked about a premature conversion of property that we need to kind of look out for. Is any of the staff members aware of what the detail is and determination of what actually prime is in the ag land definition?
There is a definition, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what it is, but it's a value of how much you actually make off of that property for agricultural purposes. None of the area within SASM qualifies, I can tell you will qualify for ag land. That where you're going to potentially get some qualifications is out in West Marin, but it's not going to be in the SASM area because that's all developed area. There's no agricultural that I'm aware of occurring in that
I
area.
think Alto has some horse property and things, but
Yeah.
it seems reasonable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like as you come across it again, a little further update on that application. And then what I noticed within the structure of the document, there are kind of squiggly lines on population for each of the districts. It's like a double squiggle. believe
I
it's
know,
like-
I know what you're saying. It
I'm used to-
signifies approximate.
Yeah, I'm kind of used to a more definite number. You know, if you see a sign entering a city and population is 1,800 or whatever the number is. So I think it's a little wishy-washy.
So here's the issue with that is that because these districts aren't, many of them aren't single clean boundaries. They aren't CDPs by themselves. Like for instance, Richardson Bay covers a piece of Strawberry, a piece of Tiburon. Even within their boundary, there are census block groups that come in and come out. I can't tell you. I can't.
I kind of predict. I knew when we were working the ducks and things and getting down that level of detail on the census block is going to be difficult. But if there's a way to tighten that up, I think it particularly would be very interesting just for the relevance of how small some of the districts are.
We can look to see if there's some sort of program out there that can do that. I will say all of our previous MSRs have used estimates because that's the best we can normally do on these things.
Okay.
I will add to that even the Census Bureau will tell you that as we go from census tracts, census block units down to census block, the margin for error escalates quite a bit at each jump. So while I can tell you that I'm giving you an exact number, I don't think you.
Okay. Thanks. I think the response kind of confirms.
I'll just add, even the
expectations.
districts don't keep track and can't give you a specific number. We don't keep track of that. There's no way to, and there's really no value. So we can't give you that exact number.
Okay, well, I think there's a value in terms of knowing what a population of a service area, but the page 9 of the report as Richardson Bay, and you have that already, and thank you for before the meeting mentioning that. You're holding all the comments till then to update, but just for the general public and others looking at the currently on page 9, the link to Richardson Bay links to Bolinas Public Utilities District. So if you open up some of those links, that one is broken and goes to a different agency. And that's the end of my comments. Thanks.
for questions.
We want to stay with questions right now, if that's all right. Okay, Commissioner Berta?
Yeah, thank you, Jaren. Awesome report on this and much more concise than I thought it would be. Two questions. My first question you pretty much answered, but I just wanted to get some clarity on it. I was going to ask if there had been any public comments received today. As you said, we hadn't, but you mentioned that commissioners you'd received some public comment from commissioners. Is that commissioners of this body or another body? And is
Of this body, yes.
And is it customary for, was that like questions or was it official public comment?
It can be a combination of both. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Cause I was, okay. My other one was,
Actually, before you continue, just so you're aware, when we do present the final draft to you, you will get a table that will show every comment that we've gotten. So you will get that. We don't provide that for the draft, but we will provide that in the final.
Oh, no, I get that. Thank you, Jason. I was just kind of trying to get a sense of how much public engagement we've gotten at this point. And then in the MSR in section 3.0, and you mentioned this in your presentation, you talk about, I think you used the acronym DUCs, disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Can you discuss like a little further on what are the elements that would define what a DUC would be?
Yeah, it is a census block group that is 80% or less than the state median household income.
Perfect. Thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Oh,
One question, please.
Vice Chair Rodoni.
Thank you, Chair. Jaren, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why Mill Valley wasn't included in this study, given its location and relationships to all these other little districts.
Bless you. Mill Valley wasn't included in this study partly because number one, the study schedule was created prior to my time here. Number two, I want to say that it was reevaluated at the workshop that we did in January and reconfirmed at that time. And then Mill Valley did get independently reviewed in the last MSR, the Golden Gate MSR. So those are just my kind of three reasons that it wasn't specifically reviewed in this.
Yeah, and I will add, there's two parts to the sewer systems in that area. There's the collection and the treatment, SASM being the treatment side, collection being all the agencies. If you look at the Golden Gate review, you will actually see that there is a section in Mill Valley's MSR that actually talks about their portion of what they do for the collection side.
May I add to that?
Of course.
The other issue, which hasn't been stated yet, is that only Almonte, Alto, Richardson Bay, and Homestead are sanitary districts and are special districts. The other two members of SASM are the city of Mill Valley, not part of LAFCo, not part of the county, whatever, it's a city, and Tamalpais TCSD, so Community Service District, and it's also not a part of it. And so when all this stuff was done about trying to force consolidation, it was acknowledged and determined that those two were outside of anything that could be done anyway. So those generally aren't viewed the same as Alto, Almonte, Homestead, and Richardson Bay.
Thank you for adding that clarification, Commissioner Caius. Other commissioners? Otherwise, I have a few questions. Nothing. Just, and maybe this is my ignorance. I know we like this titles, but there are so many of these sanitary districts in Southern Marin that I think this is somewhat of a misnomer. Have we considered trying to name this so it's more clear what we're actually covering?
The commission gave us this name. This actually predates me even being with LAFCo. And this is the name that the commission gave this group. If you want to change the name, you can. I know when we did the Tiburon Peninsula MSR, we changed the name of that one. I forget what it was called, but prior to that, but the commission decided that a better name was Tiburon Peninsula. So we changed it to that. So I will yield to the commission to give us a different name if it so desires.
Well, we also changed the name of what you had called the Ross Valley MSR to the Upper Ross Valley MSR. I think we ought to think about something that more, and I don't have a suggestion, but it seems to me that we want to be clear, because when I was first reading it, it raised a lot of questions in my mind beyond Mill Valley. Like, what about Richardson Bay? I mean, and Commissioner Caius just clarified some of that. But I think if we can tailor it, it would be better. a couple of other questions. As you were doing this MSR, I noticed you talked about lowering directors for 2 of the SDs from 5 to 3. But I also noticed in your MSR that the other 2, not talking about SASM, but the other 2 also had something like, I think your quote was something like 4 of the SDs have only had formal elections 12 times in 107 cycles. And it worries me that, we're not getting the engagement as far as people standing up to get elected, and that there are a lot of appointments. So I'm wondering, did you think about making that suggestion for all 4 of the SDs to lower from 5 to 3?
That is an excellent question, and I'm pulling up on screen here something that we produced while putting this together. And I will say that what is up on the screen right now is not a perfect document. This was for lack of a better term, a rough draft that we did just to determine when we got prior to this MSR, we had actually gotten a list from the Department of Elections that shows every election that's occurred for every district, including school boards and a bunch of things that didn't involve LAFCo. So I took all those out and said, what are the LAFCo agencies that we need to look at, and put together this list. I realize it's a little small on the screen. I apologize for that. But what came out of this was that there's a variance within there. Alto and El Monte were the 2 that kind of were stuck out like a sore thumb. The other 2 in this area were similar to a lot of other special districts in Marin County. So if we're going to have a discussion about this for these 2, we would be opening up ourselves to need to have the discussion about, should we be having this discussion with a lot of other special districts across the county? And if that's a discussion we want to have, we can. But for my mind, at least, Alto and El Monte were the 2 that never had an election actually occur in the entire study period that the Department of Elections gave me, which goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, depending on what district it was. It's kind of interesting. Some districts, even though they have existed longer than that, didn't have all the information in there. I just used what the Department of Elections gave me. And those were also the 2 that had an abnormally high number of Board of Supervisor appointments to fill seats. So that's why Alto and El Monte got kind of pulled out and said, these 2 might want to look at going from 5 to 3. The other 2 districts are similar to a lot of other districts in Marin County. It doesn't occur as frequently. It doesn't occur as often. They actually do occasionally have elections. And when they don't have as many times when you see a Board of Supervisors stepping in to have to make an appointment. So to me, those 2 seem to fit in like a lot of other ones. So it didn't stick out in the same way, which is why I only said 2 of the 4. It was my recommendation with Jared and I when we were talking about it. Said 2 of the 4 seem to fit this like 5 to 3 model rather than all 4 of them needing to fit that same model.
I would suggest that maybe you could have something like it may be considered for the other 2, not necessarily as strongly. Another question I had is, did you ever consider proposing shared services, for example, for general managers? All 4 of those sanitary districts are quite small, and I saw that some of the general managers were part-time or contract, but would that ever be something we would propose in an MSR to consider shared services for general managers and potentially some of the admin staff if they have them?
I will say, and I will yield to Jaren about what's physically written in the document because I don't recall it as well. I do know when I had to sit down with the 4 board presidents, that was part of the discussion about, is there a way, like right now you have your general managers and maybe you don't want to change. They all seem to like their general managers. They're not like looking to change them, but over time, some of them are going to retire, move on to other things, have other things. Starting now, I suggested to all 4 of them, starting now, perhaps you should actually start having discussions. What would it look like if you shared a general manager together? So that way you have plans in place. So when the time comes when that person leaves, you have a plan in place to maybe do that shared agreement. I don't necessarily think we talked about it as clearly in the MSR, and if you wanted to, we could maybe flush that out.
I mean, it seems like it would be a good idea to suggest it. Maybe not today, but in the future. I understand one of them in particular. They've been begging him to stay, and he wants to retire, and it's really hard to find these folks. It may be that people in those fields are going into different aspects of civil engineering. The other thing I wondered if you considered, SASM is a pretty big agency and Mill Valley is pretty big in SASM. The other SDs in there, as well as TCSD and forget the other one, are pretty small. Would you ever consider something like proposing weighted voting for SASM, which doesn't, you say in the MSR that it doesn't, that everybody has equal shares. I'm just wondering, would it ever be something that we would propose, since my view is we in LAFCo are looking at efficiencies in government and what makes the most sense. So I'm just wondering, would that be something that would be considered, for options to propose? They don't have to do it, but
Yeah.
since we're taking this look.
Yeah, I would say on the weighted thing, I know SASM, and Lou can correct me if I'm wrong on this, has had that discussion in the past. It may have been a long time ago, but that discussion was occurred and the agreement was this is how we're going to run and everyone agreed to it. I don't think it's necessarily our play. I don't know what positives come out of us making the suggestion to something that seems to be working for all the member agencies. If one of the member agencies came to me and said, this doesn't work for us, then that might be a different discussion. But none of the agencies, even when we talked to Mill Valley, when the Golden Gate side, no, they didn't say anything. None of the other agencies seemed to say we need to change how SASM's board is run. I would not want to look to change that because I don't know what efficiency we get out of them changing a weighted system. I know that, you could argue fairness to the general public. If Mill Valley is paying for about half of SASM, shouldn't they have half the votes? But all the board members, all the agencies came together and said, this functions and this works for us. I'm not sure I would necessarily make that recommendation.
So one
myself.
question is, you mentioned you didn't know when that was. If that was 20 years ago, is it time to revisit it? For example, Commissioner Rodoni and I both sit on MWPA. We have weighted voting. We have weighted voting in MCE because of the differential population. So I think it's something to consider as you go forward, getting public comments. And, if they discussed it 20 years ago and liked it, that's fine, but things may have changed. So just one thing to throw out there as a question. And then I know that Commissioner Murray raised the idea of annexing Alto into Richardson Bay, I believe. I'm just wondering if there was any consideration of annexing Alto into Mill Valley, since it is so small. I didn't see it in the MSR. Did I miss it?
It's not in this MSR. In the Golden Gate MSR, where we review Mill Valley, we talk about the unincorporated island of Alto. And it is discussed there, as we discuss with every island, if there's ever interest in the general public for annexation. I can tell you, when we did that review, the general public people I talked to that lived in Alto had no interest in being annexed into Mill Valley. So it falls into that same category that we've been using since I've been here, at least. We're not going to force the issue on somebody. We acknowledge that it's there. We acknowledge that it would be a good idea in the Golden Gate review. I'm not sure it fits in this one, because if you're talking about annexing Alto Sanitary District into Mill Valley's sanitary system, they would be unincorporated at that point. And you would have to set up probably a new special district like San Rafael or Corte Madera have, where they have sanitary districts that go outside of the city's boundaries to cover some properties that are in those areas. So that would be a much larger task to do. I'm not sure that Mill Valley is even interested in doing that.
Okay.
So.
All right. And then one last question, because I think I missed it in the presentation. Did you talk about doing a sphere of influence for what is in common with those 4 sanitary districts? I think you mentioned that, but my head was down when you did it.
Yes, so that is the specific discussion that we are requesting that the commission have this evening, and offer some direction to staff, which may or may not be possible at the end of this meeting. But typically at the following meeting after this presentation, we would come back to you with either amended or reaffirmed sphere of influences for each of the agencies. Currently, the 4 sanitary districts, because of Marin LAFCo specific policy, have what is known as a sphere of influence in common, meaning they all 4 of them have a single sphere of influence that designates that the commission believes that a single district would better serve those communities rather than the four separate. In order to come back to you with sphere of influence updates, either amended or reaffirmed, we need direction whether or not this commission 13 years later after this policy was created still believes that that policy holds value. And beyond that, is there a feasible path towards consolidation that you see in the future?
Okay, well, I meant that as a question. I'm sorry. We can discuss that after the public hearing when Commissioner Caius is able to provide his comments. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
No, I have no questions. I have lots of comments.
Okay, well, we'll get there. So with that, I'd like to open up the public hearing on the Southern Marin Wastewater Municipal Services Review Public Draft. Is there anyone on Zoom with their hands raised? My gosh. Okay, then I will close the public hearing. And now we are ready to hear commissioner comments, and I believe Commissioner Caius was first.
Thank you. So I'm not going to take, the hour it would require to cover all these items because I've already covered these with Jaron and with Jason, but I'm going to cover a few things because it's important for you not to leave the room without having some understandings about some of these things. The first is you have to acknowledge that what we're talking about here is sewage. We're not talking about something that people like to talk about, that people think it's fun at cocktail parties. They talk about, the school boards or what the community services district is going to be doing and all their little fairs and public events. This is sewage. So people don't really want to know about sewage and don't care about sewage and don't care to become intimately involved in sewage, but it's absolutely a requirement. So you have to have these districts to provide that function to the residents and the properties in the area. So just have to keep that in mind with all these. Similarly, when you start talking about doing annexes, you have to understand that there's an old saying that shit flows downhill. Well, some of these districts, my own Almonte, for example, is all on a hill. That means that all the sewage goes to the treatment plant by gravity. There is no requirement for pumps. There is no infrastructure that is costly to pump the sewage to the treatment plant, unlike a district like Richardson Bay that is mostly flat. So Richardson Bay has to pump all of their effluent to the treatment plant across the flat lands everywhere else. So as a result, the infrastructure requirements, the cost requirements of Richardson Bay are dramatically higher than they are for the other districts. So back in the study period where people who weren't informed about how these districts operate tried to force the consolidation, you've got people like an Alto or like an Almonte who don't want to pay for the Richardson Bay, pump stations because it would just double the rates of the annual fees for doing sewage. So, it's not something that is a simple thing. It is a complex issue to consider. So, weighted voting, we looked at that. Nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted that option. The system that we have now at SASM is a system that's been refined and developed for decades. It works. So whether you like it or not, the fact is that it works. And the SASM board meetings, we don't have conflicts. We don't have issues arise from various causes because, we allocate the costs of SASM to the districts based on the number of connected sewer lines there are to the districts. So there is some, representation like that, but there isn't a problem there. So if you try to do something like weighted voting, that's creating a solution where there is no problem. And we did look at that. And we all agreed, all the people who were informed and involved back when the consolidation discussions went on, all said that's not a good deal, not a good idea. We didn't want to do that. Okay. So staff, you talked about the staff, some of the staff are part-time. Well, if you think about the staff are part-time, anybody who has a basic knowledge of math can understand if you have 2 3/4 time people, those are both part-time people, but you can't have a 1.5 people that's any less of a staff than you do for 2 3/4 time people. So it provides no benefit to try to think about doing shared services and whatever, the numbers just don't flow. The numbers don't work out. We've looked at that as well. So again, it's a problem that isn't looking for, there's no problem. You're trying to have a solution for something that's not a problem. And again, while it may look like it would work, if you don't look at the details of it, the fact is that it doesn't work. It doesn't save you anything. So why do it? No reason to do it. Elections. So, and I personally, challenged the elections information that Jaron and Jason presented. I challenged that with both Jason and Jaron. So I personally don't accept the actual numbers the way they're presented. And again, you go back to what we're talking about. We're talking about sewage. So you sometimes have people who have joined the various districts thinking that, oh, I get to be on a district. I get to be an official. And they get on, they find out what they're talking about is doing, sewer pipe repairs and what it costs to, allocate money to a section of sewer or a sewer overflow or whatever it might happen to be. And they drop off of the board. So you have to then fill that position. You can't have an election for a little district with all the expenses and costs of an election every time somebody drops off of the district. So what you have to do is get somebody who is willing to be on the board again. And the way to get that person on the board is to go to the Board of Supervisors and have them appoint somebody to be on the board. So yes, hang on, I'm going to go all the way through all this stuff. Okay.
Well, I just have a question about which numbers you're challenging.
All the numbers about how many elections there should have been for 107, or when actually Barbara's 107 election cycles and only 12 elections. Okay. So you've got to have somebody on the board to fill the positions. And the way you do that midterm is to have the Board of Supervisors appoint somebody. So yes, those numbers, I'm going to finish.
You're factually wrong.
Well, I disagree. I already said,
The Board of Supervisors doesn't get involved in filling vacancies midterm. It only gets involved when no one fills out the paperwork to file for a regular election.
incorrect.
No, that is not
Incorrect. Well, I said, we already disagree, so I'm not going to argue it tonight. Incorrect. So I challenge the numbers that are presented there as being the issue that it's trying to make it seem like there is. And then Jaron, can you put up your slide where you have the recommendations, and everything? I know you've got there, Jaron. I have faith in you. Okay, so first one, recommendations for Almonte and Homestead to pursue outside service agreements. I don't have any problem with that. That's acknowledged. I've already discussed it with both of you. If you want to do that, again, there's not a problem there. If it's necessary to meet the government requirements, that's fine. There's no issue. Specific language of SASM agreement to address protocols. Same as the first item. That's not a real big issue. And in fact, I think with one or both of you, I asked for suggested language that I could take before the boards and have them consider that. Not an issue. Go from 5 to 3. Again, you're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Right now on the Almonte board, we have 5 people. Right now on the SASM board, we have 6 people. The other boards are fully staffed. So there's not an issue there. So I don't know what the solution or the problem is we'd be trying to fix by that, but it's not a problem. I disagree with the idea that has to be, again, forced in some way to create a solution. That's just my feeling based on knowledge of it. And the last thing you have up there is the consolidation. So the consolidation, actually, I'll refrain from my personal in-depth comments, but you probably remember, Dennis, that Jared Huffman used to be on the Board of Supervisors. Oh, actually, he was a state assemblyman or whatever it was. Yeah, Marin Water, right. So there were people who had an interest in trying to, force the consolidation, other than just because it made some sense. And there was, again, across the people who were knowledgeable about the consolidation and went through all of the meetings and did all the analysis, there was consensus that consolidation was not a good thing. But we still had to go through and we had to have an election about, do you want to consolidate or not? And when the election was held, the election came back and all the districts that were, a party to this as no, we did not want to have consolidation. And as Jason already said, and I would like to have this entered into the record, we have recently, again, asked all of the board presidents of the 4 affected districts, whether you think consolidation is a good idea, would you be supportive? They all resoundingly, directly, absolutely said, no, it would not be a good deal. It would not be a good idea, would not help our service. So just want to understand that that's, things haven't changed to the point where that basic concept is here. There may be some, governmental preference from outside entities to think that's a good idea, but it really doesn't fly. It doesn't really make any sense. And we went through all kinds of effort and all kinds of meetings and lots of public, opinions and whatever else in the election. It didn't pan out. And the last, again, I want this added to the record. On page 22, there was a lot of information in here that talks about the terrible, sewage spills that precipitated all this work. And, it makes it seem like that, these districts in Southern Marin are putting effluent out in the bay all the time. So there's no question there were some sewage spills in 2008, 2010, whatever the years were. But as a result of that, we replaced the manager of the treatment plant. We brought in a new professional manager of the treatment plant. We also put a resolution plan in place and got the funds to refurbish the plant. And so since those changes were made back in 2014, there have been no issues. There have been no, problems with the treatment plant. There have been no spills. There's been no EPA issues. And in fact, the EPA has come back and loosened, all of the restrictions they put on SASM at one point because we're doing such a good job. So I want to enter into the record that since 2014 and since the changes made the general plan, there have been no further issues. And I have a whole page of other things, but I'm not going to, bore you all tonight. I'll put it in writing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kais. I just want to add one thing. I spent my master's degree waiting in a sewage effluent for a year. So unlike other folks here, I'm interested.
Good for you. Glad to hear it.
Chair, would it be okay if I responded to a couple of comments?
Yes, I think that's a good thing
Okay.
at this point.
So first off, I want to freely acknowledge, I think the comment about the fact that the affluent issue is no longer really an issue, that we haven't had a problem, is a great addition. I have no problem adding that type of stuff into the report. I think it adds value to it. There were a couple of other items that I did want to talk about, just what the value is and why we make some recommendations. But before I get into that part, you mentioned each district has its own uniqueness. Some, have gravity driven systems, so you don't need pumps, and others are flat, so need pumps. Freely acknowledge that. I did, when talking to the 4 board presidents, did suggest a way to solve that problem. You create one district with 4 zones within it. You have the Almonte zone, the Alto zone, the Homestead zone, the Richardson Bay zone, and basically you have one board overseeing 4 different districts that have whatever they're paying now, however their system is maintained now, will continue to be done that same way. All of them resoundingly said, we're still not interested in it, and I'm not pursuing, you don't see me in the report pursuing, let's do a consolidation, because I hear the board president saying, let's not do it. We should keep it on the table. We should continue to acknowledge that this is an option in the future should they ever change their minds. But I am not going to be one that's going to try and sit there and force a position of that nature at the end of the day and do what we tried to do in 2011. I'm not looking to do that today. And I would not recommend that to the commission. If the commission wants to, that's a policy decision. The commission, of course, can do that, to take that position, but I would not be recommending that hard line of a position at this point. We should continue to acknowledge that it exists, but we shouldn't be forcing it at the end of the day. On the election stuff, I will say, Commissioner Kayes, I'm going to, Jaron, if you can take, thank you. If I can share screen here real quickly, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about and how it works. So you understand that we're not talking about board appointments. I once again apologize. This is not the biggest thing, but what you will see on this screen, you'll see spots like this one right here where my cursor is currently at. where, I don't know if it'll let me highlight. It doesn't let me highlight on here, unfortunately. But the box that I have highlighted right now, that's where someone left office midterm and Almonte, in this case, yeah, I'm looking at Almonte's district, appointed the replacement. That's how the process works. If you look at the box right above it, you will see that Kevin, in that election cycle, no one ran for office, and the Board of Supervisors, because no one filed out the paperwork, it becomes the Board of Supervisors' responsibility at that point to do the appointment. The only things that are in our report are the Board of Supervisors. I am not touching or looking at or reviewing in any way, shape, or form the spots where someone ran, they resigned midterm for whatever reason, and the board, the Almonte board or Alto board or any of the other boards replaced them. I completely ignore that in this report. So I want to make very clear that we're only talking about spots where not enough people filled out paperwork to put their name on the ballot in a regular election cycle. Commissioner Berta.
Just in the situation where does the appointment, is that then ratified by the Board of Supervisors, or is it just straight up the appointment by the board?
To be fair, I did not.
I'm wondering if that's the point of confusion.
It is.
For Lily, because in that case, I could see your point, but it technically is the body that makes it. I'd be surprised if the board would go against.
Board of Supervisors has to approve it.
Is that
ratified? But it is the district that does the appointment, I think is.
We can select who we want to have, but it goes to the Board of Supervisors. Yeah.
Can we get clarification on that?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer today. We will look into it and get clarification for you. I did not, just to be blunt though, I did not look at a single situation where that occurred. That is not part of what is in this report. What is in this report is every single time that not enough people filled out election ballot stuff for the March or November, whenever the election occurred, that not enough people were filling out paperwork to run for that seat. So there was an empty seat because of not enough people doing it. So that's when the Board of Supervisors steps in and does the appointment directly. Now, maybe from what I understand, it's possible that the districts give recommendations during that process, and that's fine. But I was specifically looking at not enough people running for office when those seats are there. And that's all I'm looking at in this MSR. We don't look at that other scenario where there's a vacancy midterm, because that occurs everywhere. And I'm not going to bring an issue about that.
But I think your point is the data that are in here are not even looking at that. So that's not, no matter what if the Board of Supervisors ratifies a midterm appointment, it doesn't matter because it's not covered in here. And the data you
Correct.
presented is only for those situations where nobody filed for election. And I think
Well, in that case, excuse me, but in that case, then you only show 2 Board of Supervisors appointments here.
Well,
And one of those, I have to say, just to, again, factually correct, one of those of Kevin Riley, I happen to know intimately. Kevin screwed up. Kevin was on the board before the election period came up to file papers. Kevin screwed up and didn't file papers on time. And we had to then, when nobody else came on to who did file papers, we had to go back to the Board of Supervisors and have Kevin appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
well, let's do one
anyway,
thing.
I wasn't
Let's
trying
not
to get into the
disparage
details tonight.
people that, let's try to keep this as civil as possible.
It is civil.
Commissioner Lucan, you wanted some clarification.
Yeah, I was
on
just
that.
gonna, I don't know if we have the answer right now, but I'm not aware of a situation where the Board of Supervisors would ratify an appointment made by a separate board. If somebody resigned midterm, the board usually has a process that they would appoint somebody. So maybe I'm missing something.
like I said, I did not review any of that, so I have no knowledge of what the actual rules are. But just to get back to Commissioner Kayas's point about Alto, here is the list that I got from the Department of Elections starting in 1974. You get an appointment in 86, 96, 98, 2000, 2004, 2006, 2010, 2016, which he is acknowledging that, there was someone who didn't fill out paperwork, and that's why that particular one exists. I will freely acknowledge that in this particular case, you have a district that right now has a very active board president, Commissioner Kayas, who's making sure that when he hears about a vacancy, he's making sure that he's going out to the community to find someone to fill that seat. And he does an excellent job of it. My concern is not today or what's occurring right now. My concern is the track record. What happens when Commissioner Kayas decides to retire, move on? Maybe there's someone that follows him. Maybe there's not. When you go over and then look at Alto, you then get to the next district, you then see here 85, 2 board members in 1 year needing to get, not filling out paperwork to file. So the board supervisors had to step in. You come down again, you have 87 again, a regular seat and a short term in the same year.
I don't argue about anything with
So
Alto.
let's do this. Okay. I believe your data in the report is correct, but for Commissioner Lucan, maybe offline, you can confirm that process. I would appreciate
Yeah, no,
that.
we are doing that. And so just to finish up the last thing, why we said 5 to 3 is because you have so many people needing to fill seats. If you had 2 fewer seats, that's 2 fewer people you need to be finding to rotate through those seats. So going from 5 to 3 gives you the ability to have fewer people there. And so hopefully you get a more steady flow of the same people serving, and you get less of a, who's that 4th person and that 5th person serving on the board? You only have 3 people to worry about.
I think
rather than
that
5.
that also answers the question where you don't have as much interest in sewage as you might have in city councils. But I know Commissioner Berto wanted to speak, but he's spoken once. So let's ask alternate Commissioner Smith has had his hand up. And we'll get back to you, Commissioner Berto.
If you
Press the
green light
button
on-
in the green light.
Oh, I see.
Keep your
Okay,
finger
sorry.
off of it.
I just, I mean, I'm new, so I'm sorry if this is, but I'm trying to figure out if there's been a controversy over members, or is there been any concerns about citizens not being well represented on their sewer boards? I mean, has this been an issue at all? I'm not sure why we're discussing something. I sort of take the philosophy, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, okay, the MSR, and you missed the beginning. The MSR is to, Jaren did a good job of kind of giving you an overview, and since you are new, but it really looks at what's working, what's not working. So it's not about people coming in complaining. And so we are trying to present a review of overall what's occurring, pointing out some areas that may need things, and making recommendations. So we have a commissioner who's very well versed in this and has been in this for many, many years. And he has a lot of very specific concerns. But as he mentioned, there's not a lot of people that are very interested in sewage. So I don't think those meetings are well visited. But we want to make sure that people in those areas are being represented. So I think the staff did a good job of trying to not get into the really controversial issues and not proposing consolidation today, but trying to propose some small changes that would make things easier. For example, if you went to 3 directors and you don't have a lot of interest in a district, then you have 3 people that are really representing that district. So I hope that answers your question.
There, I did it. Only partially. If the districts aren't concerned about this issue, and it'd be a fairly big one, reducing their board. I've served on a special district board. Usually it's neighbors who are interested in, doing their civic duty. They spend some time getting involved in some arcane subject like sewerage. And it's a way of participating. And I frankly think unless the sewer districts themselves find it to be a complication for them or a difficulty for them, which I'm not hearing, and maybe I missed something there, but I'm not hearing that they have a concern about it. I think it's better to have more people from your community involved in something than fewer. It just seems like an art. You're trying to, like I say, solve a problem that doesn't exist.
I think you're kind of missing the reason why we do MSRs, but your comments are on the record. Thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner Berto, you had some questions or comments?
I have comments. I have a lot of experience with sewer and sanitary.
Can you turn on your mic?
In my former life as a municipal consultant and campaign consultant, did almost every sewer sanitation district in Marin, and obviously with the most kind of high profile being the Ross Valley Sanitary District, especially at the height of all of their I don't know what you would call
There
it.
was a lot of controversy.
Yes, I was trying to stay away from the C word, but my friend and RVSD board member, Mary Silla, always like to say, and I think Lou was pointing this out in his comments, it's not a sexy issue, right? The sanitation district is the one where you want to flush the toilet and just expect that everything goes right from there. And the only time you hear from people is when it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't, but I want to thank Director Kies there are a lot of nuances, particularly in this area, especially the gravity base flow. And Director Kies is all about this because of his expert use of the term effluent. I will say, I think over time, right, consolidation may become something that's palpable for the district and for the residents there. And the way it usually goes is over time, costs rise, you have redundancy with staff, and then the price to, as Lou was pointing out, kind of the cost of all those pump stations and everything, even if you want to, with a zoned approach like Jason's suggesting, at some point the rise in general costs will outweigh the costs of those pumps, and it'll be more cost effective for the residents of the district to consolidate. I don't think that time is now. I appreciate what we're doing here with this MSR. And as Jason said, what we're doing is we're calling out things. Like, we're not trying to force an annexation. We're pointing out that it makes sense. Hey, maybe you want to consider that, if it works, it would probably be, it would make for smoother operations and frankly, as I feel, more transparency. But that's not what we're doing here. We're doing the MSR. We're reviewing. Think Lou is a fine public servant and certainly somebody who's, a strong voice for these districts, on this board. And so I take very seriously all of his comments and what he has to say. I want to clarify, Jason, you're not expecting any action here tonight. We're just receiving the presentation and we will take action at a later meeting.
Yeah, the way the MSRs work is we present the draft, we get all the public comment, and at the following meeting, we hopefully are presenting to you a final draft for approval. There are, as Jaron pointed out in his opening remarks, there are a few items that we actually could use the commission to tell us what they're looking to do, so we know how to present the final version to you at the next meeting, but we're not making any final decisions tonight.
Okay. And with that, so within those, kind of questions you have of the board, have you stated those or have you gotten the answers, I guess I should say, of what you're looking for at this point?
I'll yield to Jaron because he's the one that presented it.
Okay.
I will say no at this stage. And just for the sake of perfect clarity, I'm going to go ahead and read the final determination in its fullest, because this is the one piece of real direction that we need from the commission this evening before we come back.
Sure.
And if
Jaron, can I just interrupt you?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Lucan, I believe, had a comment maybe before then.
No. All right. When he's done.
Okay, all right.
The piece of direction that we need from the commission this evening is surrounding coming back to you with the SOIs at the next meeting, and whether or not we're going to come back to you with what is currently the sphere of influence in common. So I'm going to read this final determination in full to try to give full clarity to all of the commission.
Put them up on the screen so we can see them too.
Yeah,
I
but-
think it's great that you're reading them.
Yes.
But if they are available, I think that would be really helpful. So,
Yes, they will
and
be.
I also want to acknowledge Commissioner Murray has many years of sanitary district experience and probably hasn't used the word effluent tonight, but I think he knows it, well versed in that, correct?
Yeah, I could comment on
All right.
districts that have city and unincorporated areas too. I think Jason.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting, Jaron, but I just thought if we can, it's small, so we won't
Yeah.
really be able to see it. Okay, go ahead, read it.
Okay. Currently Alto Sanitary District, Almani Sanitary District, Homestead Valley, Richardson Bay, all share what is known within Marin LAFCo policy as a sphere of influence in common. In 2010, the Marin LAFCo policy handbook was updated with the following in section 5.1B3. The policies, procedures, and guidelines of Marin LAFCo provide that where two or more single-purpose special districts providing the same service are contiguous, those districts may be allocated a sphere of influence in common to include the areas served by both or all districts. This designation may be assigned where LAFCo believes that the particular service would be most efficiently provided to multiple communities by a single special district. I want to pause here before I continue and make sure the commission is aware that this is not something that lives inside of CKH. This is not in state government code. This is a Marin LAFCo specific policy that was created in 2010, specifically regarding our push on AB 1232 and the consolidation of these districts specifically. Continuing within the document itself, considering the manner in which the prior attempt at the consolidation of the 4 districts was unsuccessful, the removal of the language of AB 1232 from state government code that granted the commission the power to consolidate these agencies without protest hearings, the 13 years that have passed since the creation of this policy and the adoption of this sphere of influence determination, and with the low protest threshold needed to defeat future consolidation efforts, especially in light of the diminutive size of each district's population, it is recommended that the commission re-examine whether it still believes that a single special district would most efficiently provide the service to these communities, and if so, whether there is a feasible path toward the consolidation of these agencies in the foreseeable future. If the commission deems both of these things to still be the case, then the current policy needs no adjustment and the current sphere of influence in common should be reaffirmed. If, however, the commission no longer believes that a single special district would most efficiently provide the service to these communities and or that there is no feasible path toward the consolidation of these agencies in the foreseeable future, the commission should explore the removal of this policy as it would be fundamentally ineffectual. This would in turn also require the amendment of the current sphere of influence in common to each agency having its own sphere of influence that is coterminous with its current jurisdictional boundary. So what we are looking for from all of you is, do you believe that we should return to you with another sphere of influence in common, or should we return with each of these districts having its own singular sphere of influence? This is really the direction that we are hoping for this evening from the commission as a whole.
So thank you for that, Jaron, because that's I wanted to make sure you guys had everything you needed to move forward. And with that question there, so has there ever been a cost analysis done? Because I think it's hard to make that decision, right, without there being any type of real cost analysis.
There was from a consultant back in 2011.
Every analysis that you can imagine was done. Cost, people, policies, press, EPA, every analysis that you can imagine was done.
Yeah, but if Jaron's correct in that the last one was in 2011, costs have significantly risen since then. I mean, we put out a bid in February. By the time we had a bidder in July, the costs had risen by like 10%, and that was in the same year. So I would imagine costs have risen significantly since 2011.
Commissioner Berto, can we just, Commissioner Rodani has been on this commission for 20 plus years, and he would like to add something, I think. Before we go on just a little bit.
Well, I thought it might be helpful to maybe add a little history of what I remember happened at the commission. Yes, we did have AB 1232 available through us. Then Assemblymember Huffman had initiated that legislation when the sewage spills happened, and that was his concern, that we couldn't continue to have sewage spills. So he gave our LAFCo the special legislation to bypass essentially the public process, the protest and the public process. LAFCo decided they didn't want to take that opportunity and chose not to use 1232, but instead went back to their old process, which was to allow the districts that were going to be combined to have a vote of each district to see if the residents of the district or the taxpayers in the district supported the annexation. What happened was the vote was conclusive that the residents were not supporting the annexation. So by a 4-3 vote, the commission at that time, with Supervisor Kate Sears, the District 3 supervisor, voting against it, defeated any annexation at the time. So I'm not sure of the usefulness of having the 1232 language even in the language, but I do think the discussion around whether the spear being one spear is important or not going forward.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but that language you're talking about I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, Cal LAFCo came to us and all the other LAFCos across the state and said, hey, we've got all these little special pieces of legislation that sit there. We had a discussion and a debate. You might have been an alternate member at that point, which is why you probably don't recall this. We had a debate and discussion within this commission at that time about, do we want to keep that special language? We said, no, we will give it up. That's not the process we want to use. And so that piece of legislation, that language, that part of CKH no longer exists. We no longer have the ability to force the thing and ignore all of the public processes. So that's not even on the table anymore. We got rid of that because that's not how anyone at the commission at that time wanted to continue to act towards those agencies.
And I think that's consistent with what we decided in 2013.
Correct.
But my question is, should it be in the report even at this point?
We are mentioning it as a history, as part of the history side. It's not real. It's more of a history part than it is it currently exists part.
So
Just one suggestion, since it's really history and it's confusing the way it's written, what about a footnoting it rather than having it buried in the text, just footnote it, and then it's clear its historical context.
I was just going
Go
to add,
ahead.
when this discussion started, the consultant came up with a substantial amount of savings potentially by consolidation. Through this 3 or so more years of discussion and analysis and input from the special districts doing the service, the night we voted, the consultant agreed that there was little or no savings in this proposal, because they had actually worked through the details with many of the districts, better understood the services they were given. So, basically the voters said, we didn't want to do this because we like what we have. And we had a consultant saying there's literally no reason to do it because the savings doesn't exist anymore. And we actually had agreement with the districts to do consolidation and work together and manage together and do cooperative agreements and stuff. In terms of their contractors and things. So they had actually done a lot of those things. But the real issue that got hidden that night, and it was an issue for me and a couple other commissioners, was it's not the right group. If you don't include TAM and Mill Valley, it doesn't make sense because they're part of this whole system. And that was where I thought it really fell down. And for me, I think that would have to be part of the analysis if we're going to go ahead and analyze this, to make sure that those pieces are part of it. You can't take Homestead and not include Mill Valley in it. You can't do that. If you're going to consolidate Homestead with someone, it has to be Mill Valley, I think. And Mill Valley's part of SASM, and so is TAM part of SASM. So I felt we kind of were cherry picking a little bit and picking kind of the easy ones that we thought we could consolidate, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out because none of the data supported consolidation, and the voters decided we didn't want to do it anyway. And so anyway, so I thought that history might be helpful. I just wanted to comment on the board numbers. I think it's perfectly fine if LAFCo makes a recommendation that they look at changing their board members to the 3 from 5. But I think that's fine. It's up to the board what they want to do.
Agreed.
And the residents that support them. So it's still, they have to go through another process, a democratic process to make that decision. But I think it's fine for LAFCO to say,
Agreed.
we think the 3 should be an option for you and you might want to look at it. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Commissioner Berto, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I
Yeah,
thought that history
No, no
piece
worries.
was
I
important.
appreciate having that.
Larry's been waiting a long time.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I was
I
already in the
interrupted
middle of my
Commissioner Berto,
comments,
so thank you,
can I
but
just
let's go back
finish?
there.
I'll be quick, certainly. Thank you, Dennis, for that history there. Because I wanted to get to the point that Jared needs direction on here, which is, what do we want to do with the language that's in there? Do we want to keep that, I guess, soft recommendation for consolidation in there? I would, frankly, at this point, I get back to my prior comments. I think at some point down the line, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, consolidation would make sense at some point. I don't think we're anywhere as close to that now. I agree. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It sounds like the boards are very active. I'm sure if there was anything wrong, while you're not getting a lot of interest in people stepping up to serve on the board, if something was wrong, if there was a sewer spill, the voters in the district, you would hear from them, and they would take action. So in terms of how we do the language that's currently in the MSR, I would say, you know, I would really defer to the rest of the board, but say, if down the road we think it's something that may happen, it may just make sense to keep it in there. But again, I defer to the other board members with that. If you know, there's a lot more history and knowledge here than what I've had to this point. So I certainly respect all of the wisdom and
if
guidance here.
If I could just add a tiny bit of context, the only other, I'm going to say realistic, but not really realistic places in the other parts of the county where this policy would make sense is Bolinas and Stinson Fire, which who knows, maybe, but the only other one is Muir Beach CSD, Tam CSD, and Marin City CSD, which I don't see being a thing that takes place not beyond geography. Another reason that's the only other place, unless you want to count North Marin Water and MMWD, which I don't think anybody does, where this policy would be effectual as it is currently written. So
No further questions.
Okay, let's go to Commissioner Chu and then
I was going to
Commissioner
say,
Lucan.
Commissioner Lucan had his hand up. just
He told me
before.
he would go at the end.
Oh, okay.
I asked him.
Well, Jared, thanks for presenting that one paragraph. That's what I wanted to focus on because that was the ask of this commission. I think in agreement with all the other comments that have been made by the commissioners, one of the things I would consider in whether we keep this recommendation for consolidation on or not is I kind of call it like dog years. 13 years is not a lot of time for considering whether the right conditions for consolidation exist or not. So, my thought is that, we would keep that as a recommendation with the adjustments that have been discussed here, but also to focus more on how we create a path for them towards consolidation with different aspects of what conditions would exist before you consider it. And, two of the big things that always come to mind, and it's always about money, is capital expenditures. All of a sudden you have this area-wide necessity to improve something. And the other thing is some huge liability. That may not exist in these 4 sewage districts, but the example Jaren gave, for example, the fire district where they have their employees, what if, say, their unfunded PERS liabilities get to the point it's just not sustainable anymore? So I would favor keeping the recommendation for re-examining it, but to also create little baby steps for them to take. And, I don't know how we have that discussion, if it's appropriate here tonight, but I guess you need to get it in a report, correct?
Yeah, I think we need to finalize where we are before we start talking about that level of detail. And we have to see where the entire commission is, but let's go to Commissioner Lucan.
Yeah, I was going to defer to the end.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric,
the
Commissioner
most-
Lucan. So majority of the members here are new. So Commissioner Lucan, Smith, Berto, Chu, and I believe I was alternate at the time, or at least part of the time during this consolidation effort. So one thing I remember, and particularly being a long-term serving special district board member in sanitation area, is a successive amount of spills to the point that was affecting the states of the United States water and significant EPA fines. And there are some concerns and a variety of speakers from Richardson Bay coming in saying, we don't want consolidation. We have a huge amount of funds. These other districts are unfunded. And I think there was a lot of issues like we could take care of ourselves, but also a concern that these other districts should be a concern as well. So one of the things in LAFCO, it's an overarching concern. And one of our goals, it's not just if it's not broken, why should we even deal with it? Okay, so I've heard that comment tonight, but again, you have your LAFCO hat on, not your own personal hat or how you feel, but we're here to represent LAFCO's goals. One of LAFCO's goals is to look at single purpose districts. And that probably should be within our report. Single purpose districts are subject to annexation, subject to consolidation. So that is a goal. That is something that was then and all the way now. No one's kind of dealt with it. And everyone's saying, hey, we're fine. We're good just on our own. But here in LAFCO, it's a different tune. This is what we need to be looking at. And that's still existing. I really appreciate Jaren sharing, hey, there's other examples here in Marin that could be looked at too. So, our state rep at the time, Huffman, I think brought this forward to help us out, knowing that small districts with a small number of voters could easily get over that threshold to make this thing continue on. And perhaps it's not an issue, perhaps it is. I think there's quite a few people as an issue. And I think the consultant from Delta Diablo Sanitary was very briefed in these things, did come in with quite a bit of information. Here in LAFCO, we were just taking a look at it, even though we were considered kind of the lead agency. I don't think we had necessarily any skin in the game other than responding to the environmental damage that was happening in Richardson Bay due to the current governmental organization is happening there, and due to our responsibility as LAFCO to look at good governance in Marin County. So again, I really want to emphasize, and I hope it does get documented in the report. And this is a common thread that carries through, even with this current report, is it's single purpose agencies. So that's what's being considered. I appreciate staff saying these are recommendations. Newer board members, again, that's the majority of this board right now. There's things called functional consolidation. So rather than massive, complete consolidation, is you could do things like MOUs, reducing staff, reducing board representation that will make things better. Perhaps not, but this is recommendations. And we really should be focused on those single purpose districts and really what their goal is. And one of the things that came up before, I know Contra Costa County is struggling with this, is healthcare districts formed to be a financing agency, but the board continues on. Massive budget, they're paid. What exactly are they doing? Single purpose districts there. And yes, LAFCO goes after them and says, hey, these folks should be consolidated. The board, of course, is like, hey, we're fine. What we're here representing. It's like, what exactly are you doing as a board, as a single purpose district? So that hasn't been talked about tonight. I'm not sure if it's really directly talked about in the report. At least I haven't seen that issue, but I know at the time Dennis and I were engaged, and we were both special district members. As an alternate, I think we had Einar Ashbo from South Marin, who was very strongly opposed to any of this. And what I remember is Richardson Bay towards the end seemed like they were kind of fine with if there was a movement towards annexation. Of course, their board has changed, so things are always in flux. But again, single purpose districts, our hats are on as LAFCO representatives, and that's what we need to be doing.
Did you want to make a comment about where you think staff should go with the sphere of influence? So we kind of get that ball rolling, or maybe we'll wait till Commissioner Lucan finally speaks.
Yep.
You're up. Okay. And then Commissioner Kite.
No, I want to go ask because most of the comments were around this topic of consolidation. My comments were more going back to the move from 5 to 3. So I didn't want to interrupt that train of thought. Looking at the recommendation there with regards to the potential change from 5 to 3, I think the wording in that paragraph is great. And I wonder if maybe we just remove the 5 to 3, maybe don't be so prescriptive with it, because the language in there is great, an examination of the number of members of boards, but there might even be some other wording we put in there around recruiting of new members. I don't think it's just a cost thing of, yeah, go from 5 to 3 and then maybe you save a couple bucks on your stipends. Maybe some of these boards need to pay a slightly larger stipend to get people interested and available. So I don't know that we want to be so prescriptive, especially if the 5 to 3 is going to cause some heartburn amongst us as a board. I'd also suggest, I don't know if it necessarily solves the issue we're going at, because if individuals are leaving these boards midterms, I believe that if you go to 3, the board would not be able to make more than 2 appointments, because usually you can't appoint a majority of members to a board. I want to get clarification if that exists on special districts.
No, that's a city issue, not a special district issue.
So a special district can appoint a majority of their members.
I am pretty sure that is the case, but Mala's going to be looking that up and part of the answers to your other election questions from
Okay.
earlier.
I think that'd be good to know, because if that is the case, and I'm not a special district person, I would want to know that could create maybe a unintended consequence. So if we get clarification there, but general speaking, I think the paragraph, the recommendation stands on its own. And if it causes concerns, simply removing the prescriptive 5 to 3, I think still gives you the same content of what you're trying to communicate. Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Caius had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to, make one last comment on this, at least from my standpoint. Mill Valley and Southern Marin is not against consolidation of districts. As you would all remember who have been here for more than a year, the Mill Valley Fire District just merged with the Marin County Fire District with LAFCo's assistance, because it made some sense to do it. And those 2 entities came together and they drew up the agreement to make that happen. And so that's an example where it made some sense to do that. And so that's what we did, and it's working fine,
I think that was Southern Marin Fire.
whatever it was. So the point, and if I seem a little bit sensitive, and if I seem a little bit passionate about this, it's because I doubt that anybody else in here has had to go through being forced to change their organization structure as a result of some other entity. And that was the situation. That we were forced to do it and it didn't work out, and we had to pay the price, not only in terms of the effort involved, but also the cost of an election. And so it made no sense then. And all I'm trying to do is make the point that I still don't believe the conditions have changed to where it would make any sense now.
Thank you.
I'm done.
All right, so I think we're at Mala has left the room. I think we're at a point. One thing I want to just mention, in reading the MSR, to me, it looks like each of these districts do not have significant OPEB liability, and some have none. And also they all appear to be financially in good shape based on my read of the MSR. So I don't think that is a huge issue. I think we ought to talk about the key question. I have some comments about what I'd like to see just in the report, and I will be happy to think of a name, but that's not what I want to bring up. Is that I think we need, a lot of our recommendations are sort of within these very long paragraphs, and I'd like to see sort of a conclusions and recommendations section, so it really is called out. I personally feel I agree with Vice Chair Rodoni that the recommendation from 5 to 3 is not a heartburn recommendation. If we just sort of try to, say just evaluate the numbers, then you're going to go to 4, then you have a 2-2, and a lot of things fail. So I just think that's a small recommendation that they don't have to follow through on if they don't want to. But where are we at? And maybe Vice Chair Rodoni, I'm going to put you on the spot because I think you have the most experience on this commission. Where do you think staff, where would be your recommendation as far as the sphere of influence? I have one question on that. If you came back with these 4 separate spheres of influence, isn't there a lot of confluence? No, they are completely separate.
Yeah, all 4 agencies are separate. What you might have is some land between the 2 that we would need to look at and determine, well, which one makes more sense for it to go to.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, we not that long ago had one that was in one person's sphere But when the people actually went to go look at how they were going to build something, they determined, wait, it's easier for us to connect to the other in the other direction. And so we switched this for that one parcel. We ended up switching to the sphere so we could connect them into the
Okay,
other.
that's my ignorance. Do you mind if I put you on the spot?
No,
'Cause
I-
I think you
I'm
have
fine.
significant experience here.
It's my understanding this language has existed in the last, since the last review. It's not new language. And it's kind of no harm, no foul here. I think rationally, anyone that looks at the Southern Marin sewer districts, in fact, all the special districts in Marin, probably would conclude that there's some consolidation that may be needed at some point. And so I think that since there's no harm of having it in, and there may be some advantages, and I look to staff for the advantages, it's probably not a big deal at this point. But I do think that if we were going to go down the road again of looking at this, we need to have a discussion about who should be part of the discussion and who should be involved in it in terms of what agencies. Because I think that's an important issue. If there's an issue with 4 and there's 2 others that are right next door to them, why is the issue much different? I don't think there is.
Okay.
And we never studied that. So that would be my recommendation, that we don't just pick and choose what's being done here by this action.
I don't want to interrupt the train of thought there, but there is a difference between these 4 and the other 2 that are part of SASM. These 4 are single purpose agencies. The other 2, and it's similar to Central Marin Sewer agencies where you have multiple agencies there that all touch each other, share a treatment system. But in their cases, they're 4 very large systems rather than, a bunch of smaller ones.
Yeah. No, I know the difference in, there's 3,300 special districts in the California. And so if you're going after only single purpose districts to consolidate, you got a big job ahead of you. So there's got to be other reason and other rationale for doing it, not just that reason.
Okay, so would anyone, and I know Commissioner Chu, you brought up the idea of baby steps, but I think the way I heard Vice Chair Rodoni was basically leave it as is and don't go into specific detail about how to get there. It's really, to me, the way I sort of hear you is it's really something that may be considered 10 years down the road as conditions change. So it's really kind of more of a placeholder rather than a specific, this shall happen. So other commissioners want to weigh in? Commissioner, I saw Commissioner Murray. All right, Commissioner Murray, you go first.
So there are bigger issues than just, hey, this is just a bunch of pipes that you flush your toilet and do things. So larger districts deal with larger issues. In Marin County, there's a push to develop affordable housing. Developers come in to sanitation agencies wanting will-serve letters, wanting to maximize density with things that aren't organized, that are basically a few smaller districts that only do collections. Is that bandwidth capacity there to truly deal with that? So those type of agreements that may be done in larger districts and may not even be kind of on the radar in smaller districts, or whoever's going to hold the bag. In this case, it'll be SASM. So if these are time bombs that go off in the future and there's more SSOs that are going to happen, are these smaller districts that do collection that have nothing to do with it but feed into the problem going to be held to the same level of responsibility? I think that was probably some of the issues, and maybe kind of latent right now, but those issues are there, and those maybe that level of detail that LAFCo doesn't necessarily need to get involved in or put into a report, but need to be aware of. These are things districts are now recovering resources for energy production. As you know, we've had significant water issues in Marin. It's not just about flushing your toilet, but that water could be recycled and put to reuse. And for instance, our district works with MMWD in doing recycled water, and most significant in the deepest history here in Marin in doing that. So why can't a highly educated, well-funded populace in Southern Marin do recycled water? Is it the governance? They just can't get it together for the betterment of the environment. So, these are kind of questions and things on LAFCO with our LAFCO hats to look at is certain areas of Marin could do this, other areas can't. Why not? And that those might be kind of the more general questions. If we had members of the public here, that might be part of the questions that they would come with too. Like, hey, I live in Mill Valley. I consider myself a friend of the environment. I'd really like us to see reuse of the water more. And why can't we do recycled water in this part of Marin? And that would be a challenge to Jason and Jaren. And hey, guys, when you look at the inner workings and structure, is there just no bandwidth there, or just it's not consolidated to work out those details?
Not to interrupt, but I think Commissioner Kais wanted to clarify, but I think what I'm hearing, and there was actually just a pretty good Marin voice on recycled water and how expensive it can be. But I think that question would be something that the SASM board would take up potentially in the future. And with all these members, these 6 members of the SASM board, if that's something they want to look into, they're stronger together, even with their individual districts. But Commissioner Kais, did you want to add something? Oh, you're please.
Just to set the record straight, on my bookshelf at home, I have a binder that's about that thick, where SASM and MMWD did a joint study that cost about $300,000 within the last 5 years to see what the possibilities might be for recycling any of the water from SASM and working with MMWD to use that. And the conclusion was there was no way to make that pan out and happen. So it was dropped. So we have looked at that, just as we have looked at putting solar panels over the area of SASM to see if we could do solar recovery, and hired a consultant to look at that, and that didn't pan out. Just like we've looked at, getting the flare-offs from the methane that comes out of a sewage plant to see if that could be used and whether there's some benefit in that, and that didn't pan out. So we've looked at those things and they don't make any sense. So just saying, you talk about, why does it work in North Marin or whatever? Well, we've looked at it in Southern Marin and it doesn't pan out.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Chu, please. And I think let's hope that we can stay with I think we're beating this one to death a little bit. And I think if we can stay primarily with that question, I think Jaren has something he wants to add quickly. Okay, go ahead.
This is still on topic, but just to help clarify what I meant by baby steps, because we don't want to wait until 10 years in when there's actually something that starts people thinking about consolidation. So even if we don't have any specifics, I would say one of the things to suggest is, just to have it in the document so that they are looking for opportunities. One example earlier was when a new executive officer needs to come in. But another one is you always have to ask not so much why the governing bodies were opposed to it, but why was the public opposed to it? They go to the old age-old phrase of local control, but what does that really mean? Because I remember when we were trying to bring San Anselmo into the Twin Cities Police at that time, they were saying local control, and then you ask more detailed questions, and what they really liked was the fact that they had a good relationship with the beat officer on the street. Okay, well, did it have to be your officer, or could it have been one of our officers? And it turned out that they just like having the presence of having an officer around. So, you're kind of removing the impediments and trying to tee up this possible future discussion for not only governing bodies, but the public who has to support it.
Well, that may be something that Jaren wants to speak to, but I would also say these MSRs typically are done every 5 years. So it may not be this time, but Jaren, did you want to speak to this or something close?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the sphere topic specifically, because the language within the policy states that this designation may be assigned where LAFCO believes that the particular service would be most efficiently provided to multiple communities by a single special district. My thinking on if the commission's direction is to return with a sphere of influence in common once again. And I want to be very clear that I don't mean this terminology to be pejorative, that it would essentially be a bit of a virtue signal, and that this commission as a whole believes that these communities will be better served by a single special district. And I think that it's fine to hold that position, and as a fully formed adult, to simultaneously be able to understand that while we hold this position as a governmental body, we also realize that the feasibility of this action is not available to us at this time. So I think there is value in the policy itself, while having the understanding that it simply isn't feasible right now.
Jason.
Yeah, I would add, I agree both. Jared, this is one area where Jared and I probably don't agree completely. So you're going to see some staff differences, which is perfectly fine. I would say the intention of what it is, I think, is what we should be looking at. If we need to fine tune the language, we can always come back and change the exact verbiage of what a in common means, so it better fits what our understanding of what it is today actually means. This was a policy that was created many years ago, and the definition back then was probably different than what it is now. So when you're looking at it, if you think that it in the long run, as Craig likes to say, let's wear our LAFCo hats. If you think as LAFCo, we should be encouraging this to occur at some point in the future, we can always change that policy so it's not today, but some point in the future. And it's just an acknowledgement that we should continue to look at that in that direction.
Okay, so thank you, Jaren and Jason. So I guess what I heard from Commissioner Rodoni is, or Vice Chair Rodoni, I'm feeling like maybe I misheard you, but I was thinking, even though you didn't say it, that you would stay with the separate spheres of influence at this time, but still leave the language in the report that speaks to consolidation. Am I hearing that wrong?
I'm saying that's how it's been in the reports, and there's been no really harm from that happening, that being there. And I think that the rational LAFCOs would look at this potentially as an area of consideration for consolidation. So I think it's fine. I just don't think there's any harm in having it there.
Go ahead. But you need to have your mic on since we're recording.
I concur 99%, maybe 99.9% of what Dennis said. And if you just go back to how I opened my comments, I wasn't asking that anything be excised from me here. All I was asking is that language be added so that the information that's presented is placed within context so people can understand it. So that the comments about, that there's a unanimous agreement, unanimous position that consolidation doesn't make any sense gets added to this so that people can have that context to when they look at other things to know that's the case. When I asked the language be added that there haven't been any sewage spills since 2011, but that again, that puts that in context. So I'm not, like you said, Dennis, I'm not trying to change everything right now, but you have to have a full picture if you're going to put information in here. That's my belief.
Okay, and I think you mentioned it was 2014. I remember numbers. So I guess for staff, are you clear? I'm not completely clear on what to do with the sphere of influence. I'm feeling confused.
I'm right there with Vice Chair Rodoni.
Okay, so what do you want to do with the sphere of influence?
I would say this, maybe each commissioner goes around and says yes to a sphere of influence or no to a sphere of influence. We're not having an official vote. We're just getting an understanding of where each of you stand. And then we can then take that back. And hopefully that'll be clear enough for Jaren and me to actually do what we need to do for the next one.
And just for me to add some clarification to that, if your yes or no is for retaining the sphere of influence in common, where all 4 districts have a single sphere of influence together.
Okay.
Which implies that consolidation would be easier to accomplish.
It implies that the commission still believes that the 4 communities will be better served by a single district. Yes.
Okay, so let's start with alternate commissioner. You don't have a real vote, but we want to hear from you.
I'm allowed an opinion though. I think it's fine to leave it.
Okay, why don't you just say what it is? Because I think we're talking around this. Do you want the sphere of influence in common?
The in common sphere of influence
Okay,
seems to make
got
sense.
Commissioner Berto. Go ahead and say, how do you want the sphere of influence in common? Yes, no. Okay. Vice Chair Rodoni.
Sphere of influence in common.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucan.
Yes, in common, as is the current policy there.
Thank you. Commissioner Caius.
Without hesitation, separate.
Okay. So we'll give you a no. And Commissioner Chu.
Yes, in common.
Okay. And Commissioner Murray.
So I think it's good to have consistency of documents over the years, able to measure things. So and I do appreciate Lou's comment about no spills. So there's certain actions. And
Okay,
things
but
that
let's
you
just
speak
get
to.
this done.
But before I get to that, I just want to make the statements. And I also in common in that being consistent with that, I think.
Okay, and I will, and thank you, Commissioner Murray. I just think we're going a little long. So I would agree with the yes. So we have all yeses and one no is to keep separate. So I think we're good. And I think Commissioner Caius is going to provide more suggested language in writing to staff. And anyone else, feel free, you have time until November 17th, but earlier the better.
I would encourage earlier better, especially if you have a lot of them. So we have time to sit down and talk with you and find out how we can perhaps get better language and show you that better language before we have to put it into a final report.
So thank you, everyone. I know we've had a very long discussion on this matter. I think it's really important and appreciate everyone's hard work on this one. So let's move on to a couple of simpler topics.
Chair Kohler, can we get a motion to continue the public hearing to the
Oh, I'm
December
sorry.
14th meeting?
Second.
Okay, so that was Commissioner Berto moved and second Lucan. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I guess no one wants to take a 5-minute break. Okay, we can get through the next few items.
Yeah.
All right. So item 5 is discussion of issues the commission would like to be part of a January workshop.
Okay, so in front of you today is opportunity for us to have a quick discussion. I mean, quick as in far as what subject matters do you think we need to have at a workshop? I don't want to create a workshop that isn't of use to you. I'd rather have it be issues that you need to have a discussion about. Staff will of course bring its own issues that we know you need to talk about. But if there are items that you want to talk about, we want to make sure we have them. One high level question I have is how much of a LAFCo 101 or a 201 type scenario do we want to have? We have so many new commissioners. It might be good to have, but at the same point in time, some of you have been around a little bit longer now. Do we need to have that? And then this other subject matters that you want to talk about. Do we want to bring back this sphere of influence in common and have a discussion about, is that the correct policy? Is that the correct verbiage to have? It's any level of things like that can go into a workshop. It's really what you want and how it works for you that I want to hear tonight. And I would like to have it be quick so we can continue on with the rest of the meeting and do the workshop at the workshop.
Just one quick point. One of the things, we do have so many new commissioners, and I do think there is a lot of value in doing some of that. But I also think, I'm just taking a little discretion of the chair, is teasing out some of those really important topics like the sphere of influence and maybe, highlighting some issues. So for commissioners that have been on a long time, Commissioner Murray, Caius, Rodoni, who could probably do it in his sleep, let's really have some constructive discussion. So the next MSR we have, we may be able to get through those issues more quickly, but Commissioner Murray would like to comment.
Yeah, so we have an annual meeting and I think the majority of the board members will be attending the state Cal LAFCo. Great sessions. So really recommend those that attend the 101 sessions. They come kind of right off the bat. And maybe we can incorporate that. We used to have a binder for new commissioners, and I'm not sure if you're getting that with CHK.
We provide an electronic version of that. We don't have a binder anymore. It's all electronic.
Okay. And then for the session, I do think things relevant to Marin. Also, I would like to see, like we talked about, consolidation of San Quentin Village, and maybe you could just spend some time with us, walk us through the steps, what are kind of the key points, what we need to kind of work on, what are the critical paths. I think engagement of smaller special districts like resource districts and others here that may be interesting, that provide a little more outreach and see if they could come in and kind of hear from them since they're affected by it. And then we've had special legislation in the past, like actually Marin drove forward the JPA and starting to review that. So I think any things that may be coming from our annual conference, from hearing from others, often we look at comparative different LAFCOs and what they're doing. And for instance, our animal control one is always kind of held up as a good standard by other LAFCOs, and we hear about urban growth boundaries and various things. So I say keep that open, and there may be some that come up between now and when we have our January meeting to consider to put on the agenda. That's it. Thanks, Barbara.
Barbara just left for a minute, so I'll take over. Any other commissioner comments on the direction for staff? Yeah, Eric.
I'll just add, as a newer member, I know we have other newer members. I don't know if the intro, just baseline 101 there's always some value to it, but I know when I came on board, I got time with Jason, we sat down, we went through everything. I was able to ask as many questions as I wanted to. And he's always made himself available. And I know even though we have other new members, we have very experienced members with a lot of background in this. So I don't know if there's, at least for me, tremendous value in having that. But I'd like to hear from some of my colleagues. But sometimes a workshop format where everybody's gets, a couple minutes of questions, it might be better handled in some one-on-ones. The one area that I would be interested in that maybe falls in a 101 category, but I don't know if the data is readily available, is Marin unique to other counties when you look at all of the different districts that we do have? I mean, we always hear we've got a whole bunch, but relative to other counties, I would be curious to know, how do we line up with others? And are we an outlier, or are we right there in the middle? I don't know. I wouldn't want to put a week-long research effort on our staff and whether that information is readily available and could be presented in a way to show.
I can answer that right now, at least for the Bay Area. Of the 9 Bay Area counties, we are the second smallest population and the second largest number of agencies we review.
Mm-hmm. So something like, if we can get some quick analysis on that to see how that's information I would be interested in. Because I think it does start to shape maybe future policy, or maybe just the questions of how did we end up where we are, and is this the best way to provide services moving forward?
Thanks, Eric. Other commissioners? Go ahead, Craig.
Sorry. So what we've done in the past too is have this open to the public. And so the 101 sometimes is good, even though we feel comfortable as a board. I think it's really important to talk about us serving as LAFCo, not necessarily our home district, cities or counties we come from, and our obligations and what it means to serve on LAFCO and your obligations. I think that's really important. But for members of the public, I think it does bring the bar up on what is LAFCO, what are we doing? And I'm fine with not spending too much time on that. It could be a handout or something we get from the conference, but I'll leave that kind of staff on how to balance that out. But good comment, Eric. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's good for all of us to get a refresher now and then to remind us. And I think that maybe telling us if there's any new things working at the state legislation in terms of LAFCO, anything new that's being talked about that might be coming on the horizon for us. I think, I know there's been, since I've been on the board, there's been a lot of changes as to the number of agencies that we've been asked to review, which has added to the workload tremendously. So if there's anything like that coming, that would be interesting. And then Craig brought up the housing elements, and what are the impacts of those in what we're doing and the work we have to do in the future in terms of more density and maybe more services needed in some of these areas. So I think that might be a good subject to take a look at.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Berto?
Yeah, just kind of in response to what Mr. Murray said. Are there typically people members of the public that attend this
In the past, pre-COVID, we did a workshop and there were a few members of other agencies. I wouldn't necessarily say that they were general public members, but there were other agencies that did have shown up to past workshops.
That's what I was kind of expecting the answer
Yeah.
to be, because I don't think that if you're one of those people, you don't need the 101 refresher, right? If you're coming to a LAFCo retreat, you probably have an idea of what LAFCO does and are not just a member of the public. So I'm kind of with Eric on kind of his feelings about it. I think it's always helpful, but I got the opportunity to sit down with Jason as well, and I found that really valuable. And of course, there's the learning experience of just being on here and actually, hearing the items, reading the staff reports, taking the actions, working with staff. So yeah, I'd want us to focus our time mainly on the things we really need to be focused on, rather than just getting any refreshers. I would just ask if there is anybody who feels that they need that refresher beforehand, get with Jason and he'll definitely get you up to speed.
Thank you. So I want to throw a couple of commissioners under the bus a little bit. There have been comments that have been made to me in the past, and I just want to see if we want to include a discussion of them in the workshop. First off, I know we've had a few years ago, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago now, we had a discussion about if the chair should be elected and, or if there should be a rotation system in place. We've had a little turnover. Now, when we had that discussion, we had a chair for a few years. Now we've had a little bit of turnover. And so the question is, do we want to have a discussion about how our chair process works? Not necessarily, my goal at the workshop is not to create a new policy, but have a discussion about where the commission is as a whole at this point. And is that something that is of interest to the commission to have that type of discussion around not just the chair, but there are a few other policies, I think, as well, that probably should be put into that hopper of a discussion.
I think that's a good idea, but
Okay.
probably not let's not beat it to death.
Yeah.
Let's do these things sort of short and sweet.
My hope is to have what I'm going to call a rapid fire section where we put up a few items. We kind of as we did with the vote around yes or no, kind of get a yes or no, maybe a few minutes of discussion, but not too much time in discussion unless it needs it.
That would be good.
As part of that,
Could you turn your mic on, please, Commissioner Berto?
as part of that, can we add just maybe an examination of the subcommittees, and are there any needs for additional subcommittees?
That's on my list.
Perfect.
If you have a suggestion of subcommittees that we don't have that you think are needed, please feel free to let me know so I can include them into the packet and discussion before we start the workshop.
One that I would suggest is we have this on the Ross Valley Fire Board. We have a labor management subcommittee that takes into account when the items with staff contracts came up and stuff like that to make recommendations to the full board.
Okay, well, let's discuss that at the retreat rather than or you can just provide it to staff, but we have 3 staff. So it's a little different than the Ross Valley Fire.
No, I understand that, but it's also good considering the discussion that we had the last time. I think that's one of the things that gets me to say maybe we need that. So.
Okay. All right. Others want to say anything, or is this enough? I was out. I think a very short refresher is not a bad idea. And I know others spoke and I didn't hear it. So
we have a mixed review on that. So I'll be working with Joe, who is the EO for Santa Clara LAFCo. We're going to use our shared services agreement. He's going to come up and we're going to pay for his time to help run that workshop. So I'll be working with him to create a flushed out agenda that we'll present to you I'm sorry, Santa Cruz. Sorry, my apologies. So we will work that stuff out and figure out how to do something that gets what you guys are looking for as a whole.
okay. And perhaps at the December meeting, you can give us kind of a draft outline.
I will work with Joe and see if we can get it done by the December meeting or not. That might be a little quick to have a fully fleshed out thing, but we might have a
I
draft.
think just a draft outline of the agenda so that we can just see what the topics are.
Okay,
Maybe
well,
it could be,
get
maybe
your
not.
information into me now so I can have it back to you at the December meeting.
Okay. And then, so I think we're through with that one. Okay. Discussion and approval.
There's no members of the public present. Just for the record.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I forgot to ask that. Okay. The next one is discussion and approval to change the amount needed for 2 signatures to 3,500 and change LAFCO policy to reflect this new amount. Jason, would you like to give the staff
Move the
report?
item.
Yeah, I'll make it real quick. Staffer, before I started here, we had a $3,000 limit. Things have gone up over time. 3,500 will allow us to pay for MSARA and our rent. This is in the staff report. I encourage you to vote yes.
Okay, all right, well, we have Commissioner Berto moved, second Caius, but do we have any members of the public?
There are no members of the public present.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's go through the speed round of the executive officer report.
As I always do, I'm going to speed round this. So for budget update, you have in your packet the budget. We're on track. We're fine with our budget so far this year. You'll notice a few line items over budget, but those are noted in the staff report. Current and pending proposals. We got our first proposal in September for this fiscal year. It is currently in the 30-day review period and will be, if all likelihood, at the December meeting. Cal LAFCo update. First off, there was a yield to Jaren to talk about the legislation, and he'll give back to me for a few other things.
Yeah, last month, Cal LAFCo reached out to us requesting a letter of opposition to AB 399, which is technically a San Diego specific piece of legislation, but it sets a precedent that Cal LAFCo believes is not good for LAFCOs as a whole, as is our policy when policy committee and or the commission won't meet in time to be able to get that letter out. We reached out to the chair approved the letter. We sent the letter. The piece of legislation got not approved, but made it through assembly and is currently still sitting on the governor's desk to be signed.
Or vetoed, whichever it may be.
And we reached out to Assembly Member Damon Connolly, but it did get chaptered. So
Yeah,
okay.
it's sitting at the governor's desk. So then the other thing I want to talk about is the Cal LAFCo conference itself. Since we have some new members here, I'm going to put up on the screen our expense reimbursements. So those members that are attending the conference understand what you can and can't do. Basically, you get reimbursed for your time spent or for travel there. So I'm going to encourage those that are going to maybe carpool if you can. I know some people are going at different times and have different schedules. So you may need to. Someone may carpool with one person and come back with a different person, but I would encourage you guys, if at all possible, to carpool. I will have Claire tomorrow actually send out an email to those that are going to see if they can coordinate themselves in a way that will allow carpooling to occur. So that's one expense you get. You do get reimbursed for meals, although I will say it is our custom, even though it's not technically written in this policy, that if the conference offers a meal, you take that meal and do not go out and get your own meal. Even if you don't like the conference meal, you're paying for your own meal on your own. The conference is offering it. You should eat their meals. They're generally okay, but not the greatest. And finally, on that note, make sure that you bring back receipts. If more than one of you is going, if there's like on Wednesday, there is actually no meal offered. So if you're going to the LAFCO 101 in the morning, except Craig, he gets a meal because he's going on the special trip. But no one else gets a lunch. So those of you, if you go together, put it on one credit card, bring back the receipt, and I'll reimburse the person for that meal because I know there's no lunch offered on Wednesday as an example. But Thursday, all your meals are there. For those that are going on, that'll be there on Wednesday, BBK offers a dinner. I hope all of you signed up to that dinner because there's no actual meal provided by the conference either. And that one, you'll probably be over $50, so you'll have to file it on your Form 700s, but it is always a good event to go to. I've been to it multiple times. Unfortunately, I will not be there on Wednesday. I get in late Wednesday because I'm at the California Fire Chiefs Association presenting on LAFCO and our Southern Marin Mill Valley Fire consolidation. They were very interested in how that went. So I'll be doing a discussion there on that one for them. And on that is all I have for my executive officer's report.
Okay, any commissioner announcements and requests? Seeing none, let's adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
We're adjourning to December 14th. The agenda says December 8th. Our apologies. That was an error.
So December 4th?
14th.
14th. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. I know this was a long one.